Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Joyosity. Oh, this season, I often get so many questions this time of year about heated conversations. I have had my own, and I'm sure you have as well. So if you are watching live, let me know in the comments, or if you're catching the replay, I'd love to hear that too about heated conversations. Do you ever have them? Or do you never have them because you always avoid them? I don't I don't know who that person is. If you are always avoiding a heated conversation, there's one of two things happening. You are completely disengaging from relationship or you're just manufacturing fake peace. Because if you avoid conflict, that's what you create, fake peace. And I know that can just be a gut punch, that if you avoid conflict, you manufacture fake peace. And there is an appeal to fake peace. I understand that. I am a recovering conflict avoider. I do not actually love conflict, which is ironic that conflict is one of my specialties in helping people create positive culture. The reason it has become one of my specialties is because I know the pain of fake peace, not so much the pain of conflict, which I think and I wonder if this is you too, have created to be much bigger, that the pain of conflict is so great when actually I have found that the pain of fake peace is far worse. It's just far worse. But as we come into this season, when we are getting ready to gather around tables, when either Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever winter holidays are happening, at least in the US, it is a time of consistently being together. And it always falls right after election season. And you're getting together with people whom you may not see very often. Even if that's not your family, it often happens at work, especially in this hybrid remote season. It is a time where we gather people together that we don't always get to see each other because we're working in those different environments and now all together again. And what can happen in those spaces are heated conversations because we make these assumptions about other people and what they think, feel, and believe. Or we make them about them and what they think, feel, and believe. So I remember vividly the first time someone absolutely lost their temper and shouted at me. It was in a work situation. I walked into a room, into a meeting. I got an email. It's like, "Hey, can you come to the office right now?" And I was like, "Okay." Had no idea what was about to happen. And I walked in, and two of my friends, three of my friends, one was our leader, and two of them were my colleagues, peers. And I walked in and sat down, and one of my friends just grabbed my leg as I sat down, and I had no idea what was coming. And our leader just completely lost her temper. And she had she's really passionate about something, and she raised her voice. She was really yelling, if I'm being transparent and honest. She was shaking her finger at me, and sending out and really hurling accusations, um, and assumptions about me. And in that moment, I all I could do was just sit. I was really in shock. Having had some training since that experience, which was about 8 or so years ago, um, I I now know I was just experiencing shock, and I didn't know what to do to diffuse that conversation. I knew how to de-escalate with my students. I didn't know how to de-escalate with a leader. And that was a really scarring experience for me. And I can remember almost shaking coming to work the next day because I didn't know what was going to happen. It creates an instability, it creates disconnection, it creates discord. All of that happens. And it was really traumatic in that moment. And I'm wondering for you if you've ever had that type of experience, either at work where you have been blindsided, or maybe even knew it was going to be a hard conversation, but somebody loses their temper and it gets so heated that you don't know what to do next. You're not quite sure how to diffuse the situation. Or maybe it happened at Thanksgiving. It happened at a Passover celebration. It happened during Christmas. And everybody's around the table and all of a sudden it just gets heated. And yeah, some of you've had this, and you know that feeling of fear, that feeling of almost shame and insecurity. It feels so unstable. You're not sure what to do. So, since that time, I have learned how to handle that type of situation because that is the anomaly. What happens typically is fake peace. And I don't want either one of those. I don't want either one of those experiences. So I have 4 questions that are different than what you might expect. They're different in how to approach these types of conversation. It works at work as well. I think my lens here today is more when we gather as peers, as colleagues, as family. These types of questions will start to diffuse a conversation and bring greater connection. So there are 4 questions. So the first question might sound weird in a work environment, but it is, what do you love? What do you love? Another way to ask that in a work setting is, what do you value? Or maybe, what will you struggle to protect? When people get heated, it is because they are trying to protect either their love, their safety, or their belonging. So asking the question, what do you love? Somebody's getting heated. You're like, hey, it feels like something is really important here. What do you value here? What are you struggling to protect? So much of our action and our thinking is not really driven by hate or anger, but the urge to protect what we love. So, by asking that question, by sharing around what do we love, what do you value, you have the opportunity to not only name what is important for you, but really understand what is important and what matters most to the other person. It's really hard to bicker when we start from a place of, what do you value and what do you love? So that's the first question. What do you love? The second question is, what have you lost? What have you lost? Another way that you can ask this question is, what do you miss? What has happened before that means you have lost something now? What are you afraid of losing because of what you have lost? Those are different ways to ask that question. What have you lost? We've all lost something. And I'm sure if I asked right now in the comments something that you have lost over the last 3 to 4 years, we all have some things to name. And when by asking and sharing what we have lost, again, we start to build that connection. We we have a spectrum of loss, and the experience of loss is vast. We have loss of money, loss of jobs, status, identity, a sense of security, um, a sense of what really matters in the world. We've lost those things, and we've also lost people to death, or a death of a relationship, even. What you have lost impacts how you see a heated conversation, because just like what you love, you're going to try to protect your love, safety, and belonging. So if you've lost that in the past, you're going to fight real hard. You're going to fight really hard to keep that. So understanding and naming what you have lost, perhaps even what you're grieving, is a way to connect with people and understand what they're trying so hard to get back, especially if you don't get it. If they're holding a different political viewpoint, if they're holding a different perspective on education, or a different perspective of the way things should be at work, or even benefits at work. What have you lost? What are you trying to hold on to? That is a way to help you understand that person better and help you have a better connection and communication. The third question is, where does it hurt? Now, again, that might seem like a weird question to ask at work, but where does it hurt is a powerful question because we have probably all been wounded at work. May have been your first work experience where, the drive-through manager was allowed to yell at you. Or maybe you had an experience in an incredibly professional environment where people are what you would think of all dressed up to the nines, and people were still allowed to yell at you in a professional experience or to lose their temper. That's been my experience. That hurts. And so again, you're going to protect your love, safety, and belonging, and that feels really unsafe. So when you ask, where does it hurt? You start to understand what has wounded people, what makes them angry, or how and why they experience pain and anger. Regardless of your earning, your location, your gender, we all know what it is to hurt. And so when you start asking questions about how people have been wounded by social forces, by a policy, by being othered in some way, instead of assuming people are fine, you start to understand, oh, wait, my perspective isn't the only one that's hurting. Other people are hurting too. And you start to find the common connections. So, where we have been wounded are places where we will fight hard for that love, safety, and belonging. So, rather than starting to attack, you build compassion and you build empathy. Empathy is really understanding where someone has come from, and compassion is working with them in that place. Compassion, work with. And so, that what have you hurt or where does it hurt is a wonderful question to start to de-escalate these heated conversations where people just seem so polarized. What is hurting? What has wounded you? What makes you angry? How did you experience that pain before? Those are all questions to ask. Where does it hurt? Then the fourth question is, what do you dream? I I wouldn't be my Enneagram 7 self if I did not end with something that was positive and hopeful for the future. And this can be in a simple work conversation. How do you wish this could be different? What hope do you have for the future in this situation? And it can be bigger as well. But when you ask for what do you hope for the future, for yourself, for our team, for your family, for your kids, for our community, even for our nation, what do you dream is possible? We start to be in this wonder space. A few weeks ago, Harris the third was on the podcast and he was talking about being in a positive awe state is what opens us up to new possibilities. What do you dream? Allowing yourself to dream in that way, we can start to create a shared vision, one that's not just from your own personal perspective, but you start to see, oh, that I dream that too. So like we can start to be together, like the ideal picture starts to merge. And where it doesn't merge, then we can start to figure out, oh, how am I different from that? Or how can I support that? Or where am I aligned in this? When the vision is different and what we dream is different, you're like, oh, I actually dreamed that too, I never thought of that. You start to come together in a new way where things become more possible because you're in this space of I wonder what could be different. What could I hope for in this future? What changes that? And so when we ask ourselves, what do you dream, or what do you dream about for the future, we become very open to hear what others are saying. And we start to see our connection in that space. So taking the time to do this when a conversation gets heated is incredibly brave. It is not an act um, of passivity, shall I say. But again, when you avoid these types of questions, when you avoid the conflict and you're like, oh, just pass the mashed potatoes, or, okay, great. Well, the meeting's over. Everybody leaves feeling disconnected anyway, and actually feels a little bit like gaslighting has just happened because everybody's like, did you not just see that happen? And we don't know what to do. That's the fake peace end. Or if it's just allowed to continue and the person is yelling at you, everybody just witnesses it and they don't and nobody does anything, it feels very unsafe. And so when you are in this state of asking these 4 questions of what do you love? What have you lost? Where does it hurt? And what do you dream? You actually come to this middle ground that is more stable and is more powerful. You come from a place of managing a conversation in a way that comes from a human connection, not just head knowledge. We can disagree on conclusions, we can disagree on meanings about things, but when we come at it from this human level, from an emotional connection level, not emotional rampage or denial, but emotional connection. When you ask these types of questions, you create better ideas. You create more connection. Even if you end up disagreeing at the end, you now have built empathy and compassion with one another. And that changes a heated conversation. So rather than being an out of control fire, you actually have this kind of warm connection with each other. It's cooled down and you create something that you can maybe cook something on together versus it just overwhelming and you're in an inferno that destroys everything. So these 4 questions are incredibly powerful. I don't talk about them a lot. I have another set of questions I often talk about, but I was just thinking as we approach the next few weeks, the next season of get-togethers at the end of the year, whether that be family, community, work, there is an opportunity for a lot of heated conversations, or there's an opportunity for a lot of fake peace. Neither one of those feel good. So I thought I wanted to bring these 4 questions because they are so powerful in helping us to connect with one another. And when you make space for questions like this, you make space for connection, which ultimately brings you together. And in the workplace, makes not only peace, but also how you innovate, how you create, how you come to work excited to do what you do. Because remember, work should be a joy. People can be whole. This is how we do it. And then the organization flourishes with clients and profits and solving the problems in the world that the business is supposed to do. We talk about it on a family aspect. We have longer connections. We feel like, oh, we are a family. We are connected. We're a family. In this way of like, oh, I want to be around my family. I now have a space where I understand more where Uncle George is coming from. I understand why my mom thinks these things. And it builds that connection that solidifies things in a different way. And it just feels better and more whole and more human. Taking the time is really the key piece because it can feel like this rush of, I just want to explode or ignore. So I encourage you to take the time to ask the question, to be open and really listen for the answers of other people, and not just waiting for your turn to talk, my friend. Listen for the answers of the others. And taking the time for yourself to figure these out is also an incredibly powerful space. The atmosphere of wonder, like we were talking about earlier, creates a different way of learning. It's not just in your head, it actually involves all 3 centers of intelligence that the Enneagram talks about. If the Enneagram is a personality framework that I use when I'm working with teams and with clients, and exploring that the 3 centers of intelligence, your heart, your head, and your body, what we do and how we feel and how we think, that space and that time is incredibly valuable. So even before these heated conversations happen, I would encourage you to ask yourself these questions. What do you love? Where does it hurt? What have you lost? And what do you dream? You will feel more connected to yourself and other people when you kind of allow your space, yourself to wander in the direction of these questions. You'll get more clarity than you might be surprised about when you create that space. I am hosting a retreat in February, And one of the things that is beautiful about that retreat is creating the space to explore your inner world, because you will feel more connected to yourself and the stories that you tell yourself and the compassion you can have for yourself, which actually is the work of being a leader, because you can only lead as far as you've healed. And it requires time and space to get into the wonder that allows you to go, this is what I want for my next step in my career. This is the kind of community I want to build. This is the kind of team culture I want to create. You have to make the space first to do that. And so we're going to be spending some time for that in the retreat. If you're interested, just shoot me an email or a DM and I can give you more information. And when you think about approaching the tables that you're approaching at the end of this year, I encourage you to make the space to ask these 4 questions. It will really cool these heated conversations. Not just cool, but really connect you to others in a powerful and human way. So I hope that is helpful for you this week. And if you're listening to this later, you're catching the replay as we face these end of year conversations. I hope thinking about these 4 questions connects you to yourself and to other people in a way that you hadn't thought about before, and in an incredibly powerful, powerful way. We will be back next week because we're always live at 1 p.m. Eastern on Mondays on LinkedIn and YouTube. I hope to see you there. Bye, everybody. So let me put my coach hat on for just a sec. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them. Connect with us to keep this conversation going. As always, I'm Jen Whitmer. Thank you for listening to Joyosity. I don't take for granted that your earballs have a lot of information coming at you. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It really helps more people join us in creating positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.